Thank you, David. Mr. Chair, staff is ready to begin the Regional Flood Control District Technical Advisory Committee meeting. If you could please call the meeting to order.
Very good. This is Steve Ford, City of Las Vegas, calling to order the meeting of December 17th, 2020, Technical Advisory Committee. And has been our past practice, Mr. Parrish, turn it back over to you.
Thanks, sir. Good morning. I'd like to start again with some housekeeping items. As we run through the agenda, we request any committee members wishing to make a comment, ask a question, or make a motion that you say your name for the record. We will open the floor for questions after presenting each item. Also, after a motion is made and a vote is called for, each committee member will verbally vote. If the vote is unanimous, that will be noted. If there are any nay votes, then a roll call will be completed to accurately identify the vote for the record. This meeting was properly posted and noticed in accordance with the Declaration of Emergency Directive 006 issued by Governor Sisolak on March 22nd, 2020, and subsequent directives extending this directive until an end to the emergency is declared. The directives suspend the requirement in NRS for a physical location be provided for the meeting of public bodies. Pursuant to Directive 006, a physical location has not been provided for this meeting. A live stream is available of the meeting at the web address on the notice of public meeting. An email address, publiccomment@regionalflood.org, has been provided in the notice of public meeting to allow the public to participate in this meeting. This email address will be monitored during the meeting should any member of the public wish to participate in the final public comment period. Any comments received prior to or during the meeting will be read into the record and will become part of the permanent record. We'll begin with a voice roll call to verify the members present on the call. If the committee member is not present, I'll call the alternate's name for a response. So the members, please make sure you're off mute as we run through the roll call. And we'll start with Chairman Steve Ford.
Present.
Vice Chair Travis Anderson.
Present.
Keegan Luttrell.
Present.
Ed McGuire.
Present.
Dennis Cederberg.
Present.
John Salvi. And John's alternate Joe Leedy.
Present.
Mike Jansen. And Mike's alternate Mark Sorensen.
Present.
And Dale Daffer.
Present, Steve.
Thank you, Dale. I show 8 members present. We do have a quorum. Next slide, please. And next slide, thank you. Item 1 is comments by the general public. As noticed on the agenda posting, comments by the general public regarding items on this agenda were to be posted to public comment at regionalflood.org. Jackie, could you verify if we had any public comments?
Mr. Chair, for the record, this is Jackie Ramirez. There are no public comments.
Thank you, Jackie. Next slide, please. Item 2 is action to approve the agenda with the deletion of any items. Mr. Chair, the agenda is in order for approval. Any discussion? Entertain a motion.
Dale Daffer, North Las Vegas, motion to approve the agenda.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor for approval from Dale Daffer. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. That motion carries unanimously. Item 3 is action to approve the minutes of the November 19, 2020 meeting. Chair, the minutes are in order for approval. Any discussion? Entertain a motion.
Dale Daffer, North Las Vegas, motion to approve item number 3.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor for approval from Dale Daffern. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. That motion carries unanimously. Item 4 is action to accept the financial reports. Mr. Chair, the report is in your backup. If you turn to page 3 of the report, you can see the sales tax receipts through September. The estimated budget for the sales tax for September was $8.5 million. We actually received $8.9 million, which is about $370,000, or about 4.3% higher than what we budgeted. So through the first quarter of the fiscal year, receipts to date total about $25.6 million, which is about $112,000 above what we estimated, or about 0.44%. So we're essentially pretty much right on target through the first 3 months of the fiscal year, which is great news. We also added, at the request of the Citizens Advisory Committee, actually on page 4, the rolling sales tax chart. So if you turn to page 4, each bar on that graph represents the sum of the previous 12 months of sales tax, which kind of gives you a good visual of how things are going. It kind of gets rid of the outliers if you have a good month or a bad month, and shows a nice smooth curve. So things seem to be leveling out a little bit. Of course, we're in a very fluid situation with the COVID, and who knows what's going to happen next month. But for now, we're looking pretty good. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. If none, staff would recommend you accept the report. Any discussion? Entertain motion.
Ed McGuire, City of Henderson, motion to approve.
Thank you, Ed. There's a motion on the floor for approval from Ed McGuire. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. That motion carries unanimously. Item 5 is action to adopt amendments to the 10-year construction program. Mr. Chair, these are amendments to the program that for fiscal impacts that occur later in the agenda. Staff recommends approval. Any discussion? Entertain a motion.
Dennis Cedarberg, move for approval.
Thank you, Dennis. There's a motion on the floor for approval from Dennis Cedarberg. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. That motion carries unanimously. Item 6 is to receive the quarterly project status reports, reporting period August 2020 through October 2020. The report is in your backup. These are typical quarterly project status reports. Happy to answer any questions if there are any. This is just an item to receive a report, so no actions required on this item. But any discussion? Hearing none, we'll move on to item 7. Next, action to adopt the amendments to the Operations and Maintenance Manual 2021 update, or take action as deemed appropriate. Mr. Chair, we're proposing 2 small changes to the Operations and Maintenance Manual. The first change is to add language that would require the entities to include on your invoices for payment of completed work a brief description or summary of the work items that were completed as part of that pay estimate, as well as the ID miles for the facilities that we maintained. We're just asking to do that to keep a little better track of what facilities are being maintained out there in the county. The second change is to add language to the interlocal contract template that's in the manual that allows the contract to be executed in multiple counterparts. This is the same language that was added to the template interlocal contracts and the policies and procedures a few months ago. We're just matching that language in the O&M manual. We're also changing the signature block for the legal counsel to say district attorney or legal counsel. That concludes the changes. Any discussion? Entertain a motion.
Dennis Cedarberg, move for approval.
Thank you, Dennis. There's a motion on the floor for approval from Dennis Cedarberg. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. And that motion carries unanimously. Next slide, please. Item 8 is action to approve the first supplemental interlocal contract for design to increase funding for Searchlight West, State Highway 164, Clark County. Mr. Chair, this is a supplement to the interlocal contract for design. It has a fiscal impact of $240,500. These funds are needed to do additional soil borings, potholes, and survey that results from a change in the project alignment. Staff recommends approval. Any discussion? Entertain a motion.
Dennis Cedarburg, move for approval.
Thank you, Dennis. There's a motion on the floor for approval from Dennis Cedarburg. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. That motion carries unanimously. Item 9 is action to approve the first supplemental interlocal contract for construction to increase funding for Flamingo, Boulder Highway North, Charleston, Boulder Highway to Maryland Parkway, and Maryland Parkway System, City of Las Vegas. Mr. Chair, this is a supplement to the construction interlocal with a fiscal impact of $8,360,160. This change or supplement is due to, as a result of funding constraints, allocations that were to be received from outside agencies as originally presented to the board have been revised. Some agencies are pulling back on what facilities are adding to this contract. And as a result, that increased the costs for the Regional Flood Control District facilities. Staff recommends approval. Any discussion? Entertain a motion.
Mark Sorensen, motion for approval.
Thank you, Mark. There's a motion on the floor for approval from Mark Sorensen. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. That motion carries unanimously. Next slide, please. Item 10 is comments by the general public. As noticed on the agenda posting, comments by the general public regarding any item related to the Regional Flood Control District were to be posted to public comment at regionalflood.org. Jackie, could you verify if we had any public comments and read those into the record?
Mr. Chair, Jackie Ramirez for the record. There are no public comments.
Thank you. And with that, Mr. Chair, that concludes our posted agenda. I just want to remind everyone on the members on the call to remain logged in to this meeting or stay on the phone for the start of the RTC EAC meeting, which should begin in just a few minutes. I'll turn it back over to the chair.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Parrish. The TAC meeting is now adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining the RTC Executive Advisory Committee meeting. Vice Chair Cedarberg, staff is ready for you to begin the meeting.
Thank you, David. Good morning. Vice Chair Dennis Cedarberg for the record. I'd like to call to order the December 17, 2020 meeting of the Executive Advisory Committee. RTC staff will begin with a roll call of committee members, introduce staff online, and also touch on a few housekeeping items.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. David Gloria, Management Analyst for the RTC for the record. I'll be calling your name in alphabetical order. Please confirm your attendance as I read your name. Travis Sanderson.
Present.
Mario Bermudez.
Here.
Vice Chair Dennis Cedarberg.
Present.
Dale Daffern.
Present, David.
Susan Danielowitz.
Present.
Keegan Luttrell.
Present.
Ed McGuire.
Present.
Johanna Murphy.
Present.
Joey Paskey.
Present.
Richard Sechrist.
Present.
Fred Solis.
Present.
And Michael Tassi.
I am here.
Okay, thank you. Please note that we have several RTC staff on the line for today's meeting. This includes Mr. David Swallow, Deputy CEO, Mr. Don Penuelas, Senior Director of Engineering, Mr. Craig Rayborn, Director of the Metropolitan Planning Organization, Mr. David Clyde, Associate General Counsel, Mr. Joe Damiani, Manager of Engineering, Mr. Andrew Kelman, Manager of Transportation Planning, and finally, Ms. Michelle Laramie, Senior Regional Planner. As the Vice Chair mentioned, I have a few housekeeping items to go over. When Vice Chair Cedarberg asks for comments from the committee or calls for a vote, please remember to unmute your line before speaking. Remember to state your name for the record before providing comment. Be sure to mute your line if you are not speaking. Voting will be done verbally. The Vice Chair will call for ayes and nays. If there are no nays, then the motion will carry. If there are nays, then a roll call vote will be required. In the event of a roll call vote, please wait for your name to be read to provide your vote. The Vice Chair will call for any comments or questions after an item has been presented. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Gloria. Mr. Penuelas, for the first item, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Cedarberg and members of the committee. John Penuelas, RTC Senior Director of Engineering for the record. The first item on the agenda is to conduct the first citizens participation period. But first, as you know, on March 22nd, 2020, the State of Nevada Executive Department issued Declaration of Emergency Directive 006, which suspended the requirement to have a physical location for public meeting. Pursuant to Directive 006, and for the health and safety of the community, this meeting is being held virtually. To allow for public participation, the RTC is accepting public comments via email at publiccomments@rtc.com. Comments can be submitted to be read aloud or to be added directly to the written record. Mr. Gloria will read the public comments received by the RTC.
Thank you, John. Vice Chair Cedarberg again. For the record, this is the first time set aside for public comment. This time is limited to comments on items included on the agenda. Comments will be limited to the first 500 words, with the remaining words to be included in the written record. Do we have any comments?
Thank you, David Gloria, for the record. There are no public comments received at this time.
Thank you. Moving on, Mr. Penuelas.
Thank you, Dennis. Item 2 is to approve the agenda. The agenda is in order and ready for approval.
Are there any comments or questions from the committee? Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
Ed McGuire, City of Henderson, I'd motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The motion carries. Thank you. Mr. Penuelas?
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair. The next item is to approve the consent agenda. Staff would like to pull item 11 from the consent agenda to be considered separately. Otherwise, the consent agenda is in order and ready for your approval.
Are there any comments from the committee or questions? Hearing no questions or comments, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Penuelas.
Thank you, Dennis. The next item is item 11, and it is to approve and authorize the chairman to sign supplemental interlocal contract number 1 to revise the project scope and increase funding for engineering from motor vehicle fuel tax funds for the City of North Las Vegas Project 239A-MVFT Safety Upgrades Program for fiscal year 2021. City of North Las Vegas. This item was pulled to fix a clerical error on the item's backup, which lists the incorrect contract number on pages 1 and 2. Staff recommends approval of the item with a correction and that it be sent to the RTC Board of Commissioners for consideration. So just to be very clear, where the contract says contract number 1090, we need that to read 1190. And Streets and Highways staff will make that correction, and it will be in order and ready for approval at the January 14th board meeting. So staff would recommend approval as amended.
Thank you, John. Are there any comments or questions from the committee? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. The motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Penuelas.
Yes, thank you, Dennis. Item 25 will be introduced by Craig Rayborn.
Thank you, Mr. Penuelas and Vice Chair Cedarburg. Craig Rayborn, Director of the Metropolitan Planning Organization, for the record, and this item will be presented by Mr. Andrew Kelman.
Thank you, Craig. Andrew Kelman, Manager of Transportation Planning, for the record. Item number 25 is to review and approve the 2021 to 2050 Regional Transportation Plan, which is named Access 2050. The Regional Transportation Plan, or RTP, is now in the final stages of adoption, having closed a 30-day public comment period in late November. All comments received during that comment period have been reviewed, and any necessary edits or clarifications to the plan have been completed. And I do have some slides if we could advance. And then one more is okay. For context of what is included in the plan and why it is being updated, the current RTP was adopted in 2017, and federal regulations require it to be updated every 4 years. The RTP must have a planning horizon of at least 20 years, and this proposed plan looks out to 30 years. With this long-term outlook, the purpose of the RTP is to forecast the long-term transportation needs and goals for our region's surface transportation system, and then identify the specific projects and programs for implementation during that time. Next slide. The process we have taken for developing the RTP, it all started 2 years ago when the RTC conducted a transportation visioning survey. This critical input then led to the development of specific strategies to be implemented. Another key milestone in developing the plan was a call for projects that went out to all local agencies earlier this year. Through this call for projects process, the RTC identified 71 new high priority projects that will utilize federal funding for completion. And in the final phase of plan development, the RTC conducted public outreach, and the final plan is scheduled to be taken to the RTC board for consideration next month. Next slide. So talking about the vision survey real quick, it was central to developing the RTP to ensure that it reflects the preferred priorities of residents. To gain this insight, a transportation vision survey was conducted, which received over 12,200 responses when it closed in December of 2018, making it one of the largest reviews ever conducted of local preferences about transportation. Next slide, please. One of the main findings of the survey was that residents want more investment in all forms of transportation. Responses to multiple questions showcased the need for investments in roads, transit, bicycle, and pedestrian facilities. And this is a key finding because the majority of survey respondents identified that they drove their own vehicle every single day. The survey even provided the option to select, we don't need any transportation investments, but that option was only selected by 2% of respondents. So the need for greater broad-based transportation investment was made clear from this survey. Next slide. In terms of prioritizing investments, with the majority of respondents being car owners, many residents describe a desire for improvements in road maintenance, improved safety, and fewer traffic jams. But importantly, a majority also support investment in transit and walking and biking infrastructure, even people who drive daily. And just a note on this graphic, respondents were able to select more than one option, so they don't add up to 100%. And these 5 displayed here are the top priorities out of 8 total. Next slide. So these survey findings were then synthesized and used to guide development of the document. Access 2050 was developed with a focus on implementing the survey investment priorities into guiding the overall RTP mobility strategies. The 5 identified primary strategies closely match the top priorities from the vision survey. And one key attribute of this plan is that every single project included in the RTP, which is over 200 projects, is designated as achieving one of these 5 primary strategies. There are also secondary strategies included in the plan, and these have been assembled through coordination with local, state, and federal agencies to ensure that RTP meets the long-term transportation planning needs of the region. Next slide, please. It should also be noted that these strategies were not developed in isolation at the RTC. This table shows how the plan reinforces similar goals developed and included in comprehensive plans from each of the local entities in Southern Nevada, as well as the Southern Nevada Strong Regional Plan. Next slide. The primary purpose of the RTP is to identify the long-term transportation needs for our region. As one of the fastest growing regions in the country, our needs will largely be driven by forecasted continued population growth. Southern Nevada is currently home to more than 2.3 million residents, and the region will surpass 3 million residents by the year 2050. This graphic displays the location of that forecasted population growth, and as we can see, most of the growth is occurring outside the 215 Beltway, where new development is happening. Next slide. This rapid growth in population can then strain the region's transportation system by increasing automobile travel. All areas of Southern Nevada will experience significant increases in travel over the next 30 years. The largest increase in travel will be additional trips occurring within the urban core area surrounding the resort corridor area. So that is the area in red on this map. So this area will experience a 66% increase in new travel over and above today's levels in the year 2050. Next slide. To meet these regional growth challenges, Access 2050 proposes a balanced investment program that directly addresses this growth reality while also being responsive to the mobility preferences of residents. The investment approach is to select and fund projects that address one of the primary RTP strategies. This map helps provide an understanding of what projects are included in the plan. The plan includes over 200 projects, but some of these projects can't be mapped, like funding for safe routes to school programs or additional funding for RTC's transit fleet. We can't put those projects on a map, but 188 of the projects included in the plan can be mapped. And so you see those here displayed. Next slide. And I just want to quickly highlight how individual projects help implement overall strategies in the plan. So this is an example of a safety project included in the plan from Clark County. Clark County actually has a few pedestrian flasher safety projects included in the plan. This is one of them. It's for school zone flashers for Reese Elementary School in the Southwest Valley. Next slide. This is an example of 2 congestion projects included in the plan: the City of North Las Vegas's signalization project on North 5th Street and intersection improvements at North 5th and Cheyenne. Next slide. Here's an example of a multimodal project in the plan. It's the design and construction of the Via Nobilia Trail in West Henderson. Next slide. And finally, the plan's largest investment category is for maintenance projects, which matches both local needs and preferences from the Vision Survey. So this is an example maintenance project from the City of Las Vegas for reconstruction of the Charleston Boulevard underpass. Next slide. So that highlighted a few individual projects contained in the plan, but taken as a whole, the investments in the plan help get people to the places they need and want to go. One way the plan achieves this is by reducing congestion. And we can see this by comparing the no build and the build scenarios. These maps both display traffic congestion in the year 2050 and show that the RTP has a significant impact on reducing congestion. Next slide. Another way of looking at these same benefits is at the individual level. Average time spent driving today is currently 32 minutes per day in Southern Nevada. By the year 2050, that will increase to 36 minutes per day with this plan's investments, so under the build scenario. But if you take those investments away, it would increase to 42 minutes per day in 2050 under the no build scenario. Next slide. Another essential benefit of reduced congestion is improved air quality. Per federal regulations, this plan must not contribute to any violation of air quality standards. This plan has met these standards by demonstrating that travel-related emissions are less than the established budgets for carbon monoxide, PM10, particulate matter of 10 microns or less, and ozone. Next slide. So in summary, all of these various inputs fed into plan development. And the document outlines a vision that results in safer roads, fewer delays, more choices, and a stronger economy. Next slide. And one final note about feedback we received on the plan during this final 30-day public comment period. The comment period included a mapping survey that provided an opportunity to review project details, rate the project with a thumbs up or down, and leave feedback on each individual project. And all of this input we received on specific projects will be passed along to the project sponsors. So we'll hand that over to you soon. The survey was promoted via e-blast, social media posts, and in-person outreach events located throughout the region. And not counting the hundreds of comments that were submitted directly on social media, approximately 500 comments were received by the RTC, and these are included in an appendix of the plan. Each comment includes an individual response with a note of any action taken to address the comment. The survey also asked one final question. It asked respondents if all of the projects included in the RTP would help them get to where they need and want to go. And only 12% said that the projects would not help them. So there was a large majority of survey respondents who saw the benefits of the RTP investment program as a whole. Next slide, please. And that concludes my presentation. RTC staff recommends approval of the Access 2050 Regional Transportation Plan.
Vice Chair Cedarberg, I think you're on mute.
You're correct. Thank you, Andrew. Are there any comments or questions from the committee? If there are no questions or comments, do we have a motion?
Ed McGuire, City of Henderson, motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. The motion carries. Thank you. Mr. Rayburn?
This is David Gloria for the record. Craig, before we move on, Vice Chair Cedarberg, I just wanted to clarify for the record, was there a motion for items 11 and the consent agenda and 11 to follow staff recommendation? I wanted to clarify, was that you who made the original motion for those items?
No.
I don't believe we had a motion before we took the vote. Would we be okay to go back to those items and get a motion for the votes that were taken on those?
Hey, David Gloria, Ed McGuire, City of Henderson. I noticed the same. I would motion for approval of both.
Perfect. I will make, could we just get a vote for both of those items really quick? For Ed McGuire's motion.
Aye.
Aye, and aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
For the record, David, you could say that I was on mute when I made the motion.
Thank you, Ed McGuire.
Okay, David, we can proceed now?
Yes, thank you, Craig.
Okay, great. Thank you, David. Thank you, Vice Chair Cedarberg, and thank all the members of the committee for indulging in the little sidetrack there. So our next item will be presented by Mr. Andrew Kelman again.
Thank you, Craig. Andrew Kelman again for the record. Item number 26 is to review and approve the Unified Planning Work Program, or UPWP, Amendment number 3. As a reminder, the UPWP is a federally required planning document that identifies upcoming transportation planning activities and studies to be performed by the Metropolitan Planning Organization. The RTC is currently operating under a UPWP that covers a 2-year planning period, and this 2-year planning period will expire next July. And just a quick note about development of the next UPWP, the RTC will soon initiate coordination with stakeholders in January to begin development of that new document. So we will be reaching out to all of you soon for study proposals and ideas to help us develop a new UPWP. Next slide. But for this amendment, the UPWP is being amended to reflect project funding adjustments. These adjustments adjust the carry forward funding amounts for 22 studies from fiscal year 2020 to 2021. So it essentially cleans up the remaining budget amounts in each fiscal year. It also adds the new HOPE grant study that was awarded FTA discretionary funds to identify potential new microtransit routes for low-income populations. This is the same project that was amended into the Transportation Improvement Program at last month's EAC meeting. Similarly, this project also needs to be included in the UPWP since it is a planning study. And finally, this amendment number 3 includes updated cost estimates for existing studies as their scope of works continue to be developed before starting. Next slide. So in summary, all of the funding changes are within the amounts budgeted to be available. And by including these funding changes in the UPWP, these funds will be reimbursed by the Federal Highway Administration upon their approval of amendment number 3. Next slide. And that ends my presentation. RTC staff recommends approval of UPWP amendment number 3.
Thank you, Andrew. Are there any comments or questions from the committee? Hearing none, do we have a motion?
Dale Daffer, North Las Vegas, motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve. All those in favor, say aye.
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 All those opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Thank you. Mr. Rayburn?
Thank you, Vice Chair Cedarberg. Item 27 is to receive a presentation about the Downtown North Las Vegas Opportunity Site 5-year progress report. And this item will be presented by Ms. Michelle Laramie.
Thanks, Craig. Again, Michelle Laramie for the record. So some months ago, we shared with you that we were beginning work to evaluate and update the Southern Nevada Strong Opportunity Site implementation strategies. And we've now made significant progress on this project, so we wanted to give you a quick update of where we're at. Next slide, please. If you remember, there are 4 opportunity sites that were identified during the Southern Nevada Strong planning process, and each site has its own set of implementation strategies. So we're currently working our way through each of the 4 opportunity sites, working with the individual jurisdictions where the sites are located, and updating the implementation strategies that were adopted for each one. And we've started these updates with the downtown North Las Vegas Opportunity Site, which is the area shown here on the slide. And for those that aren't as familiar with downtown North Las Vegas, the Opportunity Site is the area just north of Owens Avenue and east of the I-15. And it encompasses several points of interest for the city, including North Las Vegas City Hall, Jerry's Nugget, and the newly developed Maya Cinemas. So we've finished the report for the downtown North Las Vegas Opportunity Site, and I'll be sharing just a few highlights from our process and from the final report with you. Next slide. So our process began with a heavy data collection effort, including a review of city plans and capital improvement projects. And we had several discussions with city staff and other plan stakeholders about specific projects and efforts that have taken place in the Opportunity Site area over the last 5 years. We then used this information to conduct a progress assessment of the implementation strategies that were adopted as part of the Southern Nevada Strong process. And these many drafts of these assessments were shared with North Las Vegas staff to ensure we were accurately interpreting their work and that we didn't miss anything during our data gathering period. And we used this assessment to then inform some updated strategies and recommendations for continuing to move the goals for the Opportunity Site forward. And in addition, we also see these projects, these updates, as an opportunity to help provide some additional support to our partners who specifically are working on implementing the Opportunity Site strategies. So when we developed the scope for these projects, we worked with our local partners to determine some site-specific deliverables for each Opportunity Site, where we could provide some help to move some of the more challenging aspects of this work forward. So in the case of North Las Vegas, our final report also incorporates some mapping exercises and additional research in the form of case studies around specific challenges that North Las Vegas identified as part of this process. Next slide. So as you can see in your backup materials, our final report includes 4 sections. The vision section summarizes the visionary components of past planning efforts and synthesizes them into an overall vision for downtown North Las Vegas. The progress section provides an evaluation of progress made on the Opportunity Site implementation strategies. The recommendation section, again, provides an updated action and strategy framework. And the case study section provides ideas and examples of how other communities have tackled similar challenges in other areas of the country. And so moving forward, this template will guide and organize our updates for the remaining 3 Opportunity Sites as well. So this format will likely become very familiar to you as we continue to report on our progress over the next year. Next slide. So just a couple of examples from the report. I mentioned that we worked to include opportunities for additional support or technical assistance as part of these updates. And North Las Vegas, again, identified mapping and imagery as an area where they could use some additional support. So as you read through the vision section in the final report in your backup materials, you'll see that this section was really structured around providing some of these pieces for the city. So during this project in this section, we worked with the city to create a vision deck and a vision map for the area, which can be used by the city in their future efforts to market the area for investment and redevelopment. The map we created highlights potential districts for the downtown area and locates priority sites for the redevelopment agency. And after working through various versions of this map with the city, the final map was created in GIS, as you see here, so that we can easily hand that file over to North Las Vegas so that they can continue to work with the file in their future work with this area. Next slide, please. The other two sections of the report, which I'll review, will be the most similar across all of the opportunity sites, and that's the progress and recommendations section. So here, shown on the slide in figure 3.2 is an example of the implementation strategies progress assessment framework that we put together and completed for downtown North Las Vegas. And the table shows an example of how each strategy was evaluated as part of this progress report exercise. So we evaluated each strategy using a scale of complete, on track, not started, or no longer relevant. And most of these classifications are pretty obvious, but no longer relevant was given to strategies that have been explored, but were found to not be feasible to implement or maybe just outdated at this time. So while they aren't currently being pursued, it doesn't mean that they could not be pursued again in the future if conditions change. And in the case of North Las Vegas, we found that 60% of the implementation strategies that were adopted for the opportunity site are either complete or on track, and that many of the strategies that are not yet started are scheduled to begin in the near future. So additionally, figure 4.3 shown here also provides an example of the updated strategy framework that we completed for continuing work and updating the strategies on the downtown North Las Vegas opportunity site. So in the far left column, the original strategy is listed. The middle column lists the new updated strategy. And here, in some cases, it might be exactly the same, or it might be updated to reflect recent progress and changing conditions for the area. And then in the far right column, we provide some specific recommendations for continued implementation. And these recommendations include various ideas or projects that were discussed during our review process with the city, such as future UPWP projects or specific programming and policy ideas that the city can explore. Next slide. So with the downtown North Las Vegas site done, we have started work on 2 of the 3 remaining opportunity sites. We have met with both the City of Henderson and the City of Las Vegas on their respective opportunity sites, which are Boulder Highway at the Gibson and Broadbent intersection and the Las Vegas Medical District. And we've begun our preliminary work on these progress reports. And we do expect to move through this work pretty quickly now that we have a template in place, and we should have the first drafts of these 2 opportunity sites ready for review early next year. And we'll be working with each jurisdiction to review those drafts. For the Maryland Parkway site, we're waiting until the transit-oriented development study is closer to completion before beginning our evaluation of that site. So we expect that project to begin sometime later next year and after these next 2 reports are done. Next slide. So that concludes my presentation. I would be happy to answer any questions or hear any additional comments you might have.
Thank you, Michelle. Are there any comments or questions from the committee?
Hello, this is Johanna Murphy with the City of North Las Vegas. I just wanted to thank Michelle for all of her work completing this very comprehensive review of our downtown, and appreciate all of the assistance through this process. And I think this is going to be a very useful tool moving forward as we continue to work on the implementation in our downtown area. So thanks so much, Michelle.
Great to hear. Thank you, Johanna.
Are there any other questions or comments? If there are no more questions or comments, we will move on to the next item. Mr. Rayborn.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. The last item on the agenda is the final citizens participation.
This is the second time set aside for public comment. Just a reminder that comments will be limited to the first 500 words, with the remaining words to be included in the written record. Do we have any comments?
Thank you, David Gloria, again for the record. There are no public comments at this time.
Thank you, David. If there are no additional comments, then I will close this item and the meeting is adjourned.